Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear students of the organization behavior. Today we are discussing the second lecture of the organization behavior series. And this is about the perception, personality, and emotions. As we all know that the human perceptions about an event, an object, or a person is subject to many internal and external forces. And this perception then creates a personality, and this personality, which is the outcome of a consistent behavior. And then we have the emotions. So we broadly define the perception as a process by which individuals select, organize, and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. So we have the five senses of tasting, visual sense, then we have the hearing, the touching, and the taste. So the five very common sensory impressions which we have about an object or an environment. Now, this is really very important because the perceptions are the first level of interactions we have with the people, with the persons, with the environment around. And again, based on our perceptions of things, then we develop our behaviors. So the Paul Godfrey, the chief executive officer of the Toronto-based Sun Media Corporation, notes that a lot of things in life are perceptions. He claims that a chair of the Metropolitan Toronto for 11 years, he had little real power, but people believed he could get things done, and so he did. So we can say, see the perception of people about your leadership, your power, and your influence over them is really very important. And this is the perception which ultimately creates the influence. Now, when we look at the perception, that how perception is created by an individual, there are three important components of this perception process. The first is situation in which the perception is created, the perceiver itself, and the target. For example, the time of situation, the work setting or environment, the social setting, and then the target, for example, how novel it is, motion, sound, size, background, proximity, and the perceiver, attitude, motives, interest, experience, expectations, knowledge, education, and all these together would create the perception by the perceiver. For example, if we come across an event and somebody communicates that there is an accident on the highway, then we would definitely be interested to see that when this accident has happened. For example, an accident which is happening in the night, late night or early morning, has to be more fatal. Now the environment, for example, how the road condition was and what particular reach of the highway is again very important. And then what is the social setting in terms of the area, in terms of the people around. And then the nature of target, for example, how unique this event is, how the motion and sounds and size of the event is, and what was the background and how close it is to the perceiver. Now, the perceiver itself is really very important because his attributes, his background, education, his familiarity with this kind of events, his interest, experience, and expectations out of the events are really very important. So based on these, then certainly we have perceptions. So we discussed this, that there are three components: the perceiver itself, the target, which is the about which the perceiver creates its perceptions, and finally the situation under which the perception is created. Now, the attribution theory is a very common theory about the perception, that how the people create perception about the events, and that would depend internal or external causes. For example, the internal cause behavior is believed to be under the personal control of the individual, that is, in person chooses to engage in the behavior. The external cause behavior is believed to result from outside causes, that is, the person does not have control over his or her action and is forced into the behavior by the situation. For example, if a person is late in the meeting, the internally caused behavior might include that the team member may be attending a late dinner, or externally caused behavior such as traffic jam. So normally the internally caused behavior is something which is totally attributed to the person himself, and the external behavior is something which is not in the control of the perceiver or of the individual. For example, if a person is late in the meeting, there might be the reasons that he or she might have got up late in the morning, or he may be having some problem of the power outages in the morning. And externally, he might be in time from his home, but there might be some traffic jams, or there might be some incidents in the way which could delay him. So the situation under which the perception is created may be attributed to the internal causes, which is inherent to the individual, and then we have the external causes, which are beyond the control of the individual. Now, the distorted attribution theory means that we make some errors. Sometimes we underestimate or overestimate the influence of internal factors when making judgments about the behavior of others. For example, a sales manager is prone to attribute the poor performance of his or her sales agent to laziness rather than to the innovative product line introduced by the competitor. So this is sometimes the internal attribution by the salesperson, which relate any problem to the causes on the part of the individuals rather than the environment, that may create some kind of errors in the attribution. Now, the self-serving bias is the tendency for individuals to attribute their own success to internal factors while putting the blame for failures on the external factors. This is another kind of bias in which the people would not like to take the blame, and if there is any good performance, or if there is any good achievement, they would like to take the benefit and to take the credit of it. But if there is any failure, they would attribute that to the external factors. For example, in general, people tend to believe that their own behavior is more positive than behavior of those around them. In a recent study, managers suggested that even though they were not responsible for the past poor performance of the employees, they felt that they could help employees improve their behavior in future. Now, how can we determine the attribution on the basis of which the perception is created? For example, the distinctiveness refers to whether an individual acts similarly across a variety of situations. This is really very important. For example, if a student who is habitual of late coming in the class and he's low performing, he will be considered the same under internal attribution, but his performance is attributed to external causes. Consensus considers how an individual behavior compares with others in the same situation. So when the majority of the people have the same behavior, it is attributed to external causes. If behavior is different from the majority in everyone else, it is attributed to the internal causes. So the based on the consensus of behavior, which is attributed by the, or which is exhibited by the majority of people, then it can be attributed to the external environment or external reasons. Consistency in the action that is repeated over time is for example, if a student is habitual of late coming, it will be considered due to internal causes. And if a punctual student is observed late on a day, it will be attributed to external causes. So based on the consistency of behavior, we can then attribute whether the causes are internal or external. Now, if we just look at this flow chart or this diagram, we see that the observation leads to interpretation, and then based on interpretation, we either attribute it to internal or external. For example, the distinctiveness, how often does a person do this in other situation? So if there's very rare or high seldom, it may be external, and if it is low frequently, which means more frequently, then it is internal. On consensus basis, then if the frequency is very high, it's attributed to external reasons, and if there is low frequency of the event, then it is internal. In the consistency behavior, the high frequency would again say that it is internally exhibited, and if there is some low frequency or very rare kind of attribution, then this is to the external attributes. Now, the personality of a person is the stable pattern of behavior and consistent internal states that determine how an individual react to and interact with others. So your perception and your behaviors then leads to create with your personality. The dynamic organization with the individual of those psychological, psychophysical system that determine his unique adjustment to his environment. That is Gordon Allport, that the way an individual adjusts to the psychophysical system in the organization. Personality refers to the long-standing traits and patterns that propel individuals to consistently think, feel, and behave in specific ways. Happy, sad, impatient, shy, fearful, curious, helpful are some of the characteristics which are exhibited by the personality. Now, some of the very important attributes which certainly matters in the personality is the first and the most important is heredity, because being a human beings from our genes, we inherit some of the personality traits which are developed at the conception stage of the child. For example, the physical stature, facial attractiveness, gender, temperament, muscle compositions, and reflexes, energy level, biological rhythms are characteristic. They are commonly considered to be either completely or largely influenced by your parents' biological or physiological and inherent psychological makeup. The second set of environmental factors, which the norms or family, friends, which is the people around, the environment around us, then shape our personality in which we are grown. And definitely it starts from the family and then friends and relatives and the social groups with whom we are living. For example, the people who have been born in a combined family systems have a different attributes of personality as compared to the children who are born in the nuclear families. Now, the situational conditions are really very important. That there might be some specific situations which may be different from other people. For example, the poverty, the stressful conditions, the different imprisonment or slavery or things like that would then have some very serious impacts on the personality of a human being. Now, how the personality is influencing the organization behavior or the people behavior is really very important. Some of the very important kind of personalities of people, locus of control, they are the people who have the control of their own fates, and they have very strong willpower, and they control their actions, and they are committed people. The Machiavellianism is the degree which an individual is pragmatic, maintains emotional distance, and believes that ends can justify means, and they are really people of actions. Self-esteem is the degree to which the individual like or dislike themselves. This is a really very important attribute of the personality, and many times people even lose their own self-esteem. And this is the very pathetic conditions where the individuals are having self-pity like situations. Now, this is really a very big impediment to the productivity in the organizations. Self-monitoring are the people who keep monitored, self-empowered and monitors, and self-performing, and they're the people who always go for the accountability, self-accountability, and try to deliver uh, uh, much more than others. And the risk taking are the people who are happy with the risk taking. Every person may not be able to take the risk. And even the people who are gamblers are the highest in risk taking. So people may be the risk neutral, maybe risk averter, and maybe a high degree of risk taker like gamblers. Now, the locus of control is basically the perception of a person that how he attribute it to the fate. For example, people who have their control believe that their control are their destinies and their luck. Then there are people with internal locus of control, and the external locus of control are people who believe that the external forces are controlling their actions and their perceptions and behaviors and personalities. A set of beliefs about whether one's behavior is controlled mainly by internal external factors. Internal locus of control believe that the opportunity to control their own behavior resides within themselves. External believe that external forces determine their behavior. So both have their own pros and cons. Now, this is just telling us that the people who are highly focused on the external control would believe that their behaviors are determined by fate, luck, and powerful people, while the people of having high internal locus of control will have the self-initiative, they will have the personal actions and free will, and they would like to work in a very challenging environment. The research of the locus of control says that internals are more satisfied with their jobs, more committed to their organization, earn more money, and achieve higher organizational positions because they held themselves accountable to the results, and they would try to help work very hard, and based on their hard work and commitment, they would like to see the results. But on the other hand, the people the internal also perceive less stress, they cope with the stress better and experience less burnouts and engage in more careful career planning. The internals are less likely to be absent from work, and they have more satisfied lives, and they are more satisfied in their workplaces. The self-monitoring is really very important, and the people who regulate their actions, they're the people who govern themselves. Self-governing people are self-monitoring people, and they take great care of the observe and control the image they have, they project. High self-monitoring people show concern for socially appropriate emotions and behaviors and tune into social and interpersonal cues. They regulate their behavior and self-presentation according to these situations and cues. Now, the research on self-monitoring says that the people who are highly self-monitoring or monitors gravitate the jobs that require role playing and use of their self-presentation skills. So they are the people who are very good for supervisory roles and to be role model for the employers. High self-monitors are more involved in their jobs, perform better, and are more likely to emerge as leader. High self-monitors experience more role stress and show less commitment to their organizations. High self-monitors are not comfortable in ambiguous social setting in which it is hard to determine what behaviors are socially appropriate. Dealing with unfamiliar cultures might provoke stress for them, as research is. The self-esteem is really very important, and I would just mm, recall a very famous quote of the famous Helen Keller, a lady who was born blind, but she developed the bridal education system for the blind people or the visually impaired people. And she said that self-pity is one of our worst enemy. So the people who lack the self-esteem are then taking the self-pity, and so for a really high-performing person in life, you have to have a very high self-esteem, and you have to have the positive self-evaluation. They have favorable self-images, and they have uh, very high esteem and image of themselves. Now, the behavioral plastic theory says that people with low self-esteem tend to be more susceptible to external and social influences than those who have high self-esteem. Events and people in organization have more impact on the beliefs and actions of employees with low self-esteem. So employees with low self-esteem react badly to negative feedback. It lowers subsequent performance. People with high self-esteem make more fulfilling career decisions and have higher job satisfaction and job performance. People with high self-esteem are more resilient to the strains of everyday work life. Now, how can we bolster the self-esteem? The first is to have a strong belief in and confidence in yourself, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, learn to live with the people, social networking, trying to develop yourself through training and development, try to learn the new techniques of how to develop your confidence, try to do and exert in your life. So this will definitely celebrate your results, develop your teamworks, and these all initiatives would certainly increase your self-esteem. Give yourself an appreciation when you deliver, try to celebrate with your families, and things like that would definitely then bolster your self-esteem. Now, when we talk about the personality types, there are normally, we talk about the two personality types, type A and the type B personality. The type A personality is a personality with aggressive involvement in chronic, incessant struggle to achieve more in the less and less time, and if necessary, against the opposing efforts in other things or other people. So these types A people are the people who are always moving, walking, and eating rapidly, feel impatient with the rate at which most events likely take place, try to think or do more or more things at once, cannot cope with leisure time, are obsessed with numbers, measuring their success in terms of how many or how much. So they are the people who have highly inclusive nature. They're the people who are always kind of restless and doing more works and exertive, and they would not be able to sometime even enjoy their leisure time. The type B people are just opposite to them, who would never be in emergency. They are cool-minded people, and they have no impatience. They they don't like to mention their achievements, and they always play in the grounds for fun. They relax, and they exhibit their superiority at any cost. They can relax without guilt. So they may be all the time happy, even with not performing. Now, emotions basically are intense feelings. They are directed at someone or something. Moods are the feelings that tend to be less intense than emotions and that lack in a contextual stimulus. So, for example, the emotion continuum is happiness, surprise, fear, sadness, anger, and disgust. Emotional labor refers to the requirements that employees express particular emotions at work, for instance, enthusiasm and cheerfulness to maximize the organizational productivity. People who know their own emotions are good at reading others' emotions may be more effective in their jobs. Now, while we are discussing the the emotion and emotional intelligence, we should be thinking of the very famous theory of the Goldman, Daniel Goldman, who brought this in, I think, 60s or 70s, the emotional intelligence theory. And before that, we had the intelligence quotient concepts, but IQ. But later on, the EQ concept was brought. Emotional intelligence is the capacity of individual to recognize their own and others people's emotions, to discriminate between different feelings and label them appropriately, and to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior. This was popularized by the Daniel Goleman in emotional intelligence and work with emotional intelligence. Now, with this picture, you can readily see the emotions, for example, the disgust or the surprise or the apathy or the cheerfulness or the boredom and all these. So even the facial expression is one of the biggest calendar reflection of the emotions. So these are how differently the 5 emotions, common emotions, are reflected by the individuals. The most, for example, how the surprise, how the happiness, and how the disgust, and how the fear is expressed in different ways. Now, people, 58% of your job performance is attributed to the emotional quotient, and this is 90% of the top performance in the industries have high emotional quotient, and people with high emotional quotients make $29,000 or more than their low equal counterparts. So this is a study which just tells us that how emotional intelligence is important for high-performing leaders. Now, when we have a strong emotional intelligence, we have a deep personal relationship, we have greater adaptability, we have increased personal insight, greater influence over others, fewer impulsive decisions, reduced stresses, increased confidence, and set of skills you can use to draw the best from yourself and others. Emotional intelligence support your IQ also. If the people with high IQ are also emotionally very stable, then definitely they are awesome people. And emotional quotient is the success factor in work, in all relationships. So initially, the intelligence was more attributed to the emotional intelligence quotient, but now the leaderships, they are attributed more to the emotional quotient. Now, there are 4 very important domains or parts of the emotional intelligence skills is given by Daniel Goleman. These are, for example, the personal competence, which involve the self-awareness and self-governance or management. And the second is the social competence, which involve the social awareness and relationship management. We will discuss in a bit details. Now, the self-awareness is the ability to be aware of one's own emotions, understand one's own emotional reactions, express one's emotions effectively in socially appropriate ways, demonstrate self-confidence, understand when the emotional state is present, and differentiate emotions, recognize blended emotions. Now, the self-management is the ability to manage emotions, control impulses caused by emotions, and self-motivation. The social awareness is to be aware of others' emotions, understand other emotions, relate to other emotions on an emotional level, or empathize. And finally, relationship management, that solve problems involving others when intense emotions are involved, influence others' emotion states, work with others towards shared goals, and create group synergy in pursuing collective goals. So self-awareness, self-governance, then the social awareness or empathy, and then relationship management. So when we talk about the self-awareness, that is the know yourself, and there is a very famous Arabic quotation that man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. One who has understood himself is really understood the God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the knowing yourself is really very important, and that would mean to emotionally be aware of yourself. And then the second is self-management, that how successfully you manage the stresses and how you govern yourself in a different emotional status is really very important. This would require a positive outlook, the achievement, adaptability, emotional self-control. The third is social awareness, that how the empathy and how you are mindful of the people around, and how you are very mindful of the organizational environment. And finally, you develop the skills like inspirational leadership skills, teamwork, coaching, mentoring, influencing, and conflict management. And this is how you then try to influence the others. Now, the emotional competence we discussed in a detail, that self-awareness, self-governance are regulations, and then empathy and social skills. You can improve your emotional quotient by listening very carefully to others, try to pause and think about others, you reflecting your own and then gain value learning by for the future. So you need to have a good communication skill. You have to have a resilient adaptability and creative responses. You have to have the personal management, motivated team player, and conflict manager. So just to sum up, that perceptions is the process by which individuals organize and interpret their impressions of other by giving meaning to their environments. Individuals behave in given manner based not on the way their environment actually is, but rather on what they see or believe it. An organization may spend millions of dollars to create a pleasant work environment for its employees, but despite these expenditures, an employee who believes that his or her job is lousy will behave accordingly. Now, the different perceptions of the same situations, a number of factors operate. For example, the perceiver in the object or target being pursued, or in the context of situation in which the perception is met. The perceiver attitudes, motives, interests, and past experiences all shape the way which she sees an event. The target's characteristics also affect what is perceived. Novelty, motion, soundness, size, and other characteristics at target shape the way it is seen. Objects or events that are unrelated are often perceived together because they are close physical or in timing. Persons, objects, or events that are similar to each other also tend to be viewed as a group. The setting in which we see the objects or event also affects how they are perceived. Perceiving and interpreting what others do is difficult at many times. As a result, we develop shortcuts to make the task more manageable. These shortcuts, which include attribution theory, selective perception, and Hall effect, then contrast effects, projections, and stereotypings are often valuable. They can sometimes allow us to make accurate perceptions quickly and provide valid data for making predictor. However, they are not foolproof, and there can be misguiding sometimes. The evidence suggests that the individuals perceive about their works in situation influence their productivity more than situations do. Whether the job is actually interesting or challenging is irrelevant. Whether a manager actually helps employees to structure the work more efficiently and effectively is far less important than how employees perceive the manager's effort. Similarly, issues such as fair pay, their validity in performance appraisals, and the efficacy of the work conditions are not judged objectively. Rather, individuals interpret conditions surrounding their jobs based on how they perceive their jobs. Now, the personality is basically a stable pattern of behavior, and we could discuss different kinds of personalities and how the personality is going to impact the organization is really very important. Then we discussed about the emotions, that how the positive and negative emotions are influencing the individual performance. This is a take-home assignment, and we discussed this in the class, but certainly I will leave it to the students. For example, Max is a successful financial officer at a New York-based company that recently acquired a banking institution in 2 southern states. Max will take over the recently acquired southern footprint as the new regional chief executive. The newly acquired banking institution has a long-standing reputation as a friendly institution with traditional values, and it prides itself on exemplary customer services. The current state has prepared a comprehensive package outlining the bank's vision and key customer success stories and demonstrate their commitment to exemplary service and low customer and employees turnover. It is Monday morning and Max has called a meeting at 8 a.m. Max arrives at 7 a.m. and is surprised to find only a couple of employees in the building. Max begins the meeting at 8 a.m. sharp and the auditorium seats are half filled. Max is perplexed at the turnout but begins the meeting. Shareholders' value is what it all is about. We are the stewards of the organization and we have the responsibility to the shareholders. Silence echoes in Max's ears. He continues by stating, I expect total dedication. If you cannot commit to our new visions and strategies, then this is not the right place for you. Commitment starts by being on time. Makes motions to the staff standing next to the auditorium doors to close the door. If you cannot be here in time, then you can't play in our sandbox. Later that afternoon, Max met with the executive team and outlined the strategies, goals, numbers, and deadlines. A meeting was held with senior staff members responsible for the reporting progress. Market growth numbers were up and new business numbers were increasing. A quarter later, Max had a quarterly report results. The region was on target, however, turnover increased 25%. Involuntary turnover was up to 10%. Previous customer numbers were decreasing and customer complaints were increasing. He reviewed the report with his staff. When they asked for the input, the request was greeted with silence. He sensed an uneasy feeling in the room. Emotional intelligence is an ability to perceive, assess, and manage the emotion of yourself and others. Daniel Goleman's groundbreaking work on emotional intelligence group leadership competencies into 4 brackets: self-awareness, self-governance, or self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Highly effective leaders incorporate all 4 competencies. Remember the following guidelines when working on leadership and organizational effectiveness projects. Number 1, stop and find out the purpose. Is it feasible to link the initiative to the business goals and help drive results? Find executive champions and internal stakeholders who can open doors to link the initiative to business goals and drive results. Determine existing structures and systems that will support the initiative with transparency. Use assessment tools. Incorporate emotional intelligence behaviors to existing learning initiatives. Establish the leadership program to help drive results. Incorporate a coaching and action planning process. Assess your rewards and recognition system. How would you rate Max emotional intelligence by remembering the 4 competencies of the emotional intelligence? His quarterly results number may have been different. Please comment. So you could see that in the first instance, when Max was for the first time meeting their executives and their staff, and he could see some problem with the punctuality of the people, he could not be able to control his emotions. So this was a serious self-awareness and self-governance issue. And this is where most of the time the leaders have the challenge, because when the response of the followers are not as per your perceptions and expectations, then definitely your stress level would increase and you may react or your emotions may be sometimes very negative. So in this particular case study, we could see that Max was very aggressive and very kind of negatively behaving, and he could not control himself. So this self-governance in the situations when the results were not expected as per his expectation, this was really very important. And we could see in the latter part of the case study that there was a large number of turnovers and layoffs, turnovers, and we could see the customer uh, complaints were increasing as the people were feeling apathy in terms of their association with the organization. So this is really very important for the leaders, that they should have a very clear emotional intelligence, that they should know that what are the strengths and weaknesses, what are the strong points of their emotions, and they would like to exaggerate that, and what are the weak points of their emotions. For example, they may be impulsive sometime, and they would have to control this kind of behavior. On the other hand, we could see that your self-governance in a situation with the results are not as per expectations is really very kind of challenging for you. So you can attempt these questions. This is a kind of quiz in which you can see that how you can help to assess your own locus of control, whether you are driven by your internal locus of control and you strongly believe that the fate is the most important factor in shaping your destiny, and then the external locus of control in which you believe that no, more important is your personal initiatives and personal the way you deliver. So based on this, you can then see that if you can mark out of the two choices in each question, you can mark which is more relevant to you, and then you can go to the next slide. That is the result. For example, if you rate between the A and B choice, and you give 1 point to 1B, to A, and so on. Then if you have 8 to 10 in score, you are a person with high internal locus of control. And if there are 6 to 7, then you have a moderate locus of internal control. And then 5 is mixed. And if you have a low score like 3 to 4, that would mean that you are external locus of control and you believe that the hard work is really very important. There are two arguments in this. This one argument is that the trait is the powerful predictor of behavior. So your trait, which is your basic instincts and your born traits, are really very important to make you react to the situations. But the second counterpoint states that no, its behavior is mainly determined by the situation. So you may be not a bad person, or you may not be a negative person, but sometimes the situation may force you to be negative. Now, both the viewpoints have their own arguments, and I would leave it to the readers to go through this arguments and counter arguments. This is just a video from the YouTube, which will just show you that how So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our lecture of today has been finished. Thank you very much. We will meet next time with a new lecture on the perception and emotions. It's really very interesting to understand that how the emotions and perceptions and the behavior and personality affect the organization behavior. So thank you very much. I'm really grateful.